field belonged to the church. It was left to the church with the provision that it always be kept for recreational purposes in the community. Hey, Ed, how are you?
In March, the Reverend Timothy Haut celebrated his 40th year serving the First Congregational Church of Deep River. Tim and I spent a morning discussing what drives him and the relationship with the church that has sustained him for 4 decades.
So this church was built in 1834. It's not the oldest church in the state by any means, but it's the original one. So that makes it kind of unique. There were...
Oh, so you've not had any fires or...
No, this window was like the other windows, except that when they attached the hall, they had to cover up the windows. So in that other wing, there were these stained glass windows. It was kind of a chapel, and they took them out, and they were all piled in the basement when I got here, and there's a dirt basement under here. And we decided that instead of just covering this up with curtains, we would take the pieces of those stained glass windows and make a window that could be.
Oh, that's nice.
So that's why that's different. So
The church was originally on this spot.
it was on this spot. It was. There was another house on this spot. They had to move. The yellow house over there used to be here, but they moved it away. And there was another little chapel that was the original. This part was newer, and that was pulled by oxen that rolled on logs over maybe 2 blocks. I intended to be here for a while, be present, but this has been a wonderful, wonderful community, creative, energetic, supportive, and so all of a sudden, here we are 40 years later, and I still feel like, there's things to do.
Right now in the Southern New England Conference, there's like about 640 pastors serving churches.
Wow.
And you're the only one with 40 years.
Is that right?
In fact, there's 16 pastors out of that 640 who are serving 30 years or more in a church. And you're the top.
Oh, wow. I like to be the top at something.
And the odder part of that is when you look at the bottom end, 36% of those churches have a pastor serving 2 years or less. So the trend is extremely low. The average in the conference is just over 6 years.
Wow.
That's the average.
Wow.
And you're at 40, you're pushing 50 years of ordained ministry.
Yeah.
And you're still doing 2 Sunday services.
Services.
Writing grants and looking for things. What do you think is driving you that isn't driving other pastors to stay here in one place?
It's that's I think a lot about that. Not about in comparison to other pastors. I think that this is a special place, but there's something about making that connection, and I think in a relationship that works. When you have a relationship that is that's life-giving and affirmative, it benefits everybody, the congregation, the community, and the pastor. But one of the things that I think is certainly the case is that when you are, I believe in long-term ministries, not just staying for the sake of being a long-term ministry, but one of the things that happens is you develop a knowledge of the community and the people. I know these people. I've buried, I think nearly 1,200 funerals and memorial services, committals over that time. I've been a part of these people's lives. I've been woven into the fabric of the community. I know they're the people who come in here who are struggling with emotional and spiritual problems, or who have financial needs or whatever. You watch people grow up. You care about those people, and the payback is that they trust you. And that's been the gift for me as a pastor. I think I'm a creative person. I enjoy trying new things and making. I'm a writer, so just got a book published. But people respond to that. They say take time to do that, and I'm grateful that they're their trust and their support also encourages me to be uh, to grow as the person I want to be to do the things that I love to do, to work in my garden and to walk and to hike and to write and so that feeds my my soul too.
When you've built such a relationship with a church the way you have, where there's a trust and a mutual, allowing the church to grow and you to grow, when it comes time to leave, how do you prepare the church for a time when they're going to have somebody new after 40 years?
Well, I of course I worry about that, and that's one of the reasons we try to be clear about, sort of boundaries as we move on into our life. But here's what I think I would say to the congregation. Look, you've been a good and loving congregation. My life is different because you've been supportive of me, because you've encouraged me, that you've put up with my dumb things and my mistakes and my flaws as a human being, and you've loved me in spite of that. You've got to do that to whoever comes after me, because that's the gift that you will give. If you don't do that, then what have we learned about relationships, about life? Those people who are not the old timers will have to kind of stand up and say, look, we're moving along, and we're gonna this is gonna be okay. Our experience in life is, I think, that change is scary, and we're afraid of it a lot of times. But it's also inevitable. And the truth is, one of the things we proclaim is that there's an old hymn that the times are in God's hands. Our times are in God's hands. That we have an enduring truth that speaks to those who are old and to those who are young, who are searching for that spiritual center in their life. And that's what's going to sustain us, not the things that I did or said, but the faith, the spirit that energizes us.
So it sounds like the environment of allowing risk taking, letting failure happen and learn from it is been here all along. I mean, did you come to that, or did you help build that?
I can't speak for what the church was like before I came, because I wasn't here. But I think I've encouraged us all to believe that none of us are perfect. We used to have a sign that I would put in front of the church that this is the Deep River Congregational Church. We are alcoholics and people who suffer from anxiety. We're divorced. We've lost our homes and lost our jobs. A whole bunch of things. We're depressed. And then at the bottom it said, "Come in and join the crowd." And I think that was a message that we could give, that we're not trying to say any of us are perfect or better than anybody else. And perfection isn't the image that we're trying to create. We're trying to create a message of a community that thrives because we are loving and forgiving and welcoming to everybody, and that we learn from those mistakes.
So in 40 years, there's got to be one mistake that you're just still rolling over in your head. Are you willing to talk about it?
I don't even know what that would be. I probably make them every week and every day, but the difficulties are that I do look in the mirror every morning and see the person, the minister that I wish I could be. And how many times, I hear that somebody's in the hospital or going through a hard time, and I've had a tough day, and I think, well, I'll do that later this week, and then they die, and I kick myself that I missed that opportunity. I remember when my kids were little, one day being at the department store in the area, and they're running around, and I'm trying to corral my kids, and there was an elderly couple from the church that I knew very well that walked past, and I didn't speak to them. I'm trying to corral my kids. And the man's wife died many years ago, and he did not ask me to do the funeral, even though she was a member of the church. And I went over to just to pay my respects, and I didn't complain that I wasn't called, but he said, my wife never forgave you because she was having a bad day and she saw you in the store and you didn't even speak to her. And I could justify that. I had kids under my, anybody who has kids knows what that can be, but I felt bad about it. There was another woman in the church that I would probably visit more than anybody else in the church at the time, because I knew that she was homebound and she was depressed. I hadn't been there for a couple of weeks, and one day I went over and she gave me the dirtiest silent treatment, and she was angry at me because I had let her down. Of all people, she said, nobody calls me, nobody cares about me. This church that I've been a part of for many years, they don't really care about me. And I thought you were my friend, but you haven't even called in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And I was a little angry at the time, and I said, well, you have a very interesting telephone. She said, what do you mean? She said, well, I have a telephone. My telephone not only gets calls coming in, but it makes calls out. But apparently yours doesn't do that. And she got all huffy, and I left shortly after that. And I thought, why did I do that? Why did I do that? But I think we all do that as human beings, and ministers especially, because we can't be there, although people think we are 24/7 for everybody. But I think there is a sense that we look at ourselves and put that bar very high.
You said you had over 200?
I think to over 250 baptisms, something like that over the years.
Is that your favorite part?
Well, I love it. The best one that I ever had was what was an adult baptism. A woman came in who had a very rough life. She'd been in addiction, had been in prison, had children that she hadn't seen for years, had broken up all kinds of relationships, and she said, I've gotten into a program, and I feel like I'm, for the first time in my life, taking some responsibility for my life, and I want a new start. She says, and it would mean a lot to me if you would baptize me, because I think that's going to be a part of it, my higher power. And I thought, well, sure, I'd be glad to do that. Let me go get the bowl. She said, no, I don't want the bowl. She said, where I've been, that little splash of water isn't enough. I got to go under. And I said, well, we're not a Baptist church. I don't have the facilities, a tank to do that. She said, well, there's the river right down here, isn't there? I said, well, we could go down to the river. I'd be glad to baptize you in the river. I've done a couple of them that way. But I said, I'm wearing clothes like this. I said, let me go home and put on my shorts and sandals, and I'll meet you down there in 15 minutes. So I met down there. Her mother was with her. Her mother, they'd been separated for many, many years, and it was a beautiful summer day, and we went down the boat launching ramp, the two of us, waist deep in water, and I took her in my arms and said that we did the baptism, a little informal liturgy. I said the words and dunked her under the water and brought her back up. And by that time, a little crowd had gathered. It's kind of a public park down there. And they'd all of a sudden, she came up and the water was flying. She had the biggest grin on her face. Her mother was crying. And all of these people started clapping and cheering. And the local fife and drum corps was practicing down there. They came marching by, playing the Battle Hymn of the Republic or something. I don't know. And she looked up and grinned and said, "Man, you know how to do baptisms around here." And I thought, well, that's the way it should be. That's the power of this. So, I love doing infant baptisms, but that was a beautiful one. And I love funerals too. I love being able to be with people, because I think those are the places where for no power or significance of my own, I am instantly embraced by a family. I become involved in the most intimate places in their lives, and sometimes there are no words to speak. I remember a young man that was killed on a curving road out here. His car went off the road and into the boulders along the side of the road, and he was killed. And the fire department was down there, and they said, "Can you get down here right away? His dad is here, and he wants to see his son in the car." And I can remember going down there and, just holding him in my arms, and he just sobbed. He just went limp in his arms, and they came back to the church afterwards, and there was nothing to say. No words that could take away that agony, and I know that now. But I've realized that it wasn't the words that were important. It's the presence. It's that sense of knowing that in the midst of the most terrible times of your life, when in loss and grief, there is something like love that enfolds us, something that can unfold us, that helps to lift us through those things. And that's why I still, people say you must hate that, and I don't hate that part of my job. I think that's an opportunity to affirm that sense of love in the midst of the world. It's a world that is both terribly broken and troubling and intensely wonderful and beautiful.